Hey, what's up and hello? This is the Chris Nicole giving you my views on life, love, and the world of entertainment through my eyes. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning, depending on what time you are watching this live. Hello, crew. Hope all is well. This is going to be a very deep discussion. So, first things first, trigger warning. Okay. This is a trigger warning to let you know that it can get very deep tonight. So, I'm letting you know in advance. Hello, Alicia. Hello, Elizabeth Marie. Hope all is well. So, I'm letting you know now, trigger warning. Hey, Nene. Also, because I am assuming, hey, Joseph, I am assuming that you guys have watched this documentary. Please make sure when you are typing in stuff to asterisk or spell it wrong, make sure the auto correction doesn't spell it correctly, because there are going to be certain words that you may say that I cannot post, and we do not need to have it in the chat. So please just be mindful about what you are typing. All right. So without further ado, we are going to talk about the documentary Quiet on the Set, The Dark Side of Kids TV. Now, you guys, for the most part, who have been OG crew members, kind of know my backstory. I grew up out here in La La Land, grew up around the industry, grew up in the performing arts, grew up in dance. So this documentary, there were certain parts that were shocking, but certain parts that weren't shocking for me. And we'll talk about that and how certain things for so long were culturally accepted. And it wasn't until the Me Too movement and so many other things that kind of somewhat put a stop to things. But at the same time, I think there's still things going on. It's just that now people have NDAs to keep people quiet. Otherwise, they'll get sued. So we're going to talk about the documentary, and we're going to start off with this man right here, Dan Schneider. Okay. Now, I know some of you are around my age, some of you are younger than me. Now, when I first saw Dan Schneider, I said, oh my gosh, he looks familiar. I'm like, I know him from somewhere, but like an old show from like the 80s. Like, who is this guy? Right? He was a part of this show called Head of the Class. And when they started saying that, I said, oh, okay, I remember him. Now, for those who remember, if you see the one black girl down there, that is Robin Givens. Robin Givens was a part of the show Head of the Class. That's where I think Mike Tyson allegedly saw her on that show. And that's when he realized he wanted to be with Robin Givens. That's the show that apparently she was on when Mike Tyson pursued her. Okay. So, yeah. So, Head of the Class. So, I was like, that's where I know him from. I remember him from that show. Hey, Vanna. So, immediately they went directly into Dan Schneider's background. They said he's a kid from Memphis and he was the awkward fat kid whose dad went to Harvard and his parents didn't think he was going to amount to much. So at first I was like, okay, so what are they trying to do? Are they trying to go with the whole he was the awkward fat kid, so this is why he became the monster he became to be? I was like, that's a stretch, because I mean, hell, I was an awkward fat girl growing up to a certain extent, and there's nothing close to what I would ever do that Dan Schneider did. So I'm like, where are they going here? But I was like, okay, y'all want to give the backstory? I guess you were trying to say he was a loner. Maybe he wasn't accepted. The only thing that caught my eye in that situation is that apparently he lied, saying that allegedly he studied at Harvard. So that's what kind of made me say, oh, okay, so you was lying from the beginning. Now that's what they said, that he claimed that he studied at Harvard, but we find out he didn't study at Harvard. His father did. So he finds out, he has this, talent for acting, gets into the acting world in Memphis. That's what leads him to head of the class. All right. And he was the fat kid on the show. It's still to this day that same situation in Hollywood. You typically only have one. You only have one fat person on the show. That's just how it rolls when it comes to the industry. So he was that guy, and he always was the one who got the fat jokes. So I'm sure that took a toll on him, just like, man, what is his name? I'm going to call him by his character name on What's Happening Rerun. If you guys know his story, he definitely was someone who always got the fat jokes. And when he finally lost the weight, they told him he needed to gain the weight back, because that was his job, was to be the fat one that they could pretty much make fun of. So I'm sure that definitely took a toll on his self-esteem in certain ways. But with that, he found his talent in writing, and he actually started writing on Head of the Class, which led him to Nickelodeon. All right. Now, growing up, and one of the girls who actually was on All That, Giovanni, she said it sounds so old to say that, when I was growing up, there wasn't no internet. But for us, especially 70s, 80s babies, even before that, there wasn't internet. I remember finally getting on the internet, and that was AOL. You got mail. Y'all remember that dial up? We only had certain channels to watch. So Nickelodeon was that for us growing up. And so he went there and he blew up. He created all of these shows for Nickelodeon. All That. Now in the upper, left-hand corner, that is the All That I remember. That is with Keenan and Kel. That is with I forgot the girl who is the plus size girl, but they were like the original cast of All That. He did the Amanda Bynes show, iCarly, Sam and Cat. He did all of these shows. Now most of these shows I haven't heard of, because by then that wasn't my generation. But All That beginning stages was that was supposed to be the Saturday Night Live for kids, preteens, or even teens, or like the In Living Color, for those who remember the In Living Color. That definitely was supposed to be that for kids. So that was my generation growing up. He helped create all of that, okay? And they said in the beginning, it was a real positive, funny set. He created a very funny, positive environment for these kids and the people that were working for him. And they said that was the beginning. So you're like, okay, great. Now, here comes the part where they said he was pushing these kids into greatness. Okay. Hey, Yuli. He was pushing these kids into greatness by working long hours. Now, mind you, for those who may not know, but they did mention it during the documentary, there are union laws. Kids can only work certain hours. There are certain stipulations for children. Now, the reality is that greatness, a lot of the times, in my opinion, is pushed over those laws. They will extend those laws or try to stretch those laws to get the job done. And unfortunately, the parents more than likely probably allow it, because at the end of the day, they don't want to break any balls, excuse my French. So at the end of the day, those things do happen. And it's ignored because it's a business, and the kids are seen as money, and they're making money. So, pushing into greatness means a lot of things for a lot of people. But I know in my generation, pushing people into greatness a lot of times were some of the things that were mentioned in this documentary. And what do I mean by that? Screaming at people, degrading people. Those type of things existed, including with kids. All right. And I'm just going to be honest, like What went on in my generation in the performing arts probably would be seen as a violation today. So, like, for example, growing up in the performing arts, we kept messing up on a step, or we had a competition coming up, or there was something that we needed to perfect and you didn't perfect it, you got hit. You got hit, whether it was hit on the leg, hit somewhere, you got hit to make sure that you know that you better make sure that step is correct. You better point that toe. If I have to point it for you to show you how it needs to be pointed, then so be it. Those type of things did happen. It's just, it is what it is. And it was culturally accepted because they were trying to push you into greatness. Parents allowed it. It wasn't like we were getting like, beat to a pulp type of thing, but it did happen. So, some of the things that they're saying, some of the things, not just a small percentage of the things, these are things that were normal. These are things that were normal. And it's not just LA, it's New York too, Yuli, because my people in the performing arts in New York, like LaGuardia, the performing arts schools and stuff, these were things that were typically normal back then, but that was back then. So, at first we see the first kid that really expresses things were just not right. We see Leon, okay? And Leon's one of the first people to actually speak about how he felt uncomfortable. And he said he pretty much felt uncomfortable, especially wearing those leotards, because, he was, growing as a child, not really fully confident in his body, different things like that. They had him wearing leotards. And one scene they show is him being like Captain Big Nose, or whatever the case may be. And so for me, and this is just going to be my opinion and how I view this at first. Now, I'm going literally from episode 1 all the way to 4. For me, when I saw this, I was more concerned on the racial side of it. Because you already know, as far as people have made fun of and still make fun of African features. So when I saw this, I was like, why the hell he got to be Captain Big Nose? Like, I felt like that was very racially motivated. But he says when you look at it and the actual props that they had on his shoulders, it looked like something totally different. It more so looked like an eggplant and 2 kiwis, if you know what I mean. And at first, when looking at it, I was like, no. And again, if I'm a child looking at this, I'm not thinking it looks like something else because I have a mindset of a child. But as an adult, and now I can see it flipped upside down, I'm like, oh, you have a point. But at the time, when you really think about the things that they're talking about, when we were children, we weren't thinking that way. So that's why it kind of went over our head. And I'm kind of glad it went over our head. Now, other generations after us, there was things that became even more risque where I'm like, he just kept on pushing and pushing and pushing. But back then, I'm not thinking anything besides the fact that this is kind of on a racial end. Like why he got to be Big Nose? You know what I'm saying? Why does the black boy got to be Captain Big Nose? But when he said that, I was just like, oh, I kind of see his point now, but as an adult. So that's the first one who comes on the scene about his concerns. And make sure you guys hit the like button on the way in. Then we have, I believe her name was Katrina. All right. Katrina was supposed to be that it girl. You know what I mean? Like, she was the it girl at a certain point. And she talked about how they went from telling her, like, even though she was a normal teenager or a normal child, that she was getting too fat. They already had a fat one. She needs to lose weight, even though they said, look, she in dance class for 6 hours a day. I would be in dance class too, but I was still a big girl. So whatever. But at the same time, they was telling her she was gaining weight. She was considered the it girl. Dan picked her. And as time went on, She literally, they felt she was gaining weight. Then she hit that age where her body started to develop. And at that point, she didn't look like a kid anymore. So they started to push her out. So these are things that happen in performance art, the performing arts in the industry, where at a very young age, you are already told so many times that you're not good enough and you have to do more, or you have to do things that are practically impossible to do to try to be successful. So she was that it girl. And next thing you know, they was like, she looks too old. Now, what's interesting is that based on what she says, she had a performance at the actual, I think it was the Laugh Factory. She had a performance there. And she ends up seeing this girl, Amanda Bynes. Okay. She ends up seeing Amanda Bynes. And this is Katrina with the whole original crew. She ends up seeing this girl, Amanda Bynes. She even tells Dan, they were there, I think she said, to support her, but she tells them, like, look, Amanda Bynes, this girl is actually pretty funny. She's pretty talented, flawless performance. Dan sees the potential in Amanda, and potentially what's so interesting is, and this is why I say it's the psychological F situation, because what essentially happened is Katrina introduced Dan to the talent that replaced her. Let me repeat that again. Katrina introduced Dan to the talent that replaced her, because once Amanda Bynes came in, it was Katrina who? Katrina who? And that could have broke her as far as her self-esteem and everything else. But she said she got drained, she got tired, and she decided to go to college and decided to move on. So at that point, little cute Amanda Bynes comes into all that, and the show continues, and Amanda's parents were involved in her life. Now, interesting enough, all of the parents that were on this documentary, I've met all of those parents in my time growing up around this industry, okay? So you had the Amanda Bynes parents, then you have the other parents. I'm telling you, all of those parents exist. So Amanda Bynes' parents were really involved. They were hands-on, okay? But hands-on does not mean that your kids will not get tainted in this industry, okay? But as you can see, they were still very hands-on. So at this point, Amanda started being the it girl. And at that point, Amanda ends up getting her own show, all right? Because, and again, Katrina was supposed to get her own show, but Katrina grew up. It's interesting that you get penalized for growing up, right? That's the industry. So she ends up growing up. Next thing you know, Amanda gets her show. And we have here Amanda Bynes' show. We have, I think the black girl's name is Raquel. And we have Drake down there at the bottom. Drake Bell. We're going to get into Drake Bell, but this is our first introduction to Drake. And then they have Raquel. Now, Raquel's mother is the don't rock the boat parent, okay? There were things that were said to Raquel. There were ways that Raquel was treated. For example, she said when it came to her birthday cake, that somebody gave her a birthday cake and she found out that Dan was not happy with her getting a big cake like that, made her feel less than. Her mother said she saw these things, but she didn't want to rock the boat. She didn't want to rock the boat. She didn't want to do anything that was going to jeopardize Raquel. All right. So you have that parent. So in the process of this show, and this is where it gets, because I have, you guys remember, those who've been with me for a minute, I have definitely had conversations about the Writers Guild. Remember, the Writers Guild just had a strike. Sorry, you guys. The fur baby was about to start, and you already know I had to shut that down before it happens. So, the writer's strike. These two ladies, Jenny and I believe it was Christy, they were inexperienced writers who, of course, was trying to break into the industry, but knew nothing about the industry. That is the perfect victim for this industry. They end up getting gigs and they're told immediately they have to split their salaries. No. As soon as I heard that, I said, oh, hell no. Hell no. But they didn't know any better. And they were so, first of all, one thing about this world, period, but definitely the industry, they can smell desperation from a mile away. They were so desperate to get in. They wanted to write for a living. They accepted the offer. Now, immediately they said Dan pretty much showed that he was a piece of shit who said, one, he doesn't think women are talented sketch writers. He literally said, can I call you guys the girls? It just got worse and worse for them. Certain things I'm not going to be able to repeat. For those who saw the documentary, I'm sure there were definitely moments in this situation that had you guys pissed off like me. And so at that point, what happens is, of course, when you start to get to know the business, Jenny contacted the Writers Guild and found out, hell no, he can't split your salaries. You have to have separate salaries. So, of course, when she called, Dan, Nickelodeon, probably, they all got a call and said, what's going on? This is a union show. They need to get proper salaries. Instead of Dan humbling himself and apologizing and making it right, he pretty much tells her, if you're the one who blew the whistle on me, I'll make sure you won't work for Nickelodeon, Viacom, hell, pretty much implying she wouldn't be able to work in the business again. And so at that point, these women went through hell and back. And there is one scene with Christine, or I think her name is Christy. I forgot her name. It starts with a C. One thing that she went through in that writer's room when she was talking about a high school story. And for you guys who haven't watched it, please watch it. When I tell you, anybody who has a woman or just anyone has a daughter, niece, whatever, it will piss you off to no end what he had her do. And she even felt uncomfortable talking about it. And in my personal opinion, Dan was probably doing whatever he could to break these women so they could just quit. Honestly, that's what I think he was trying to do. And it worked. He let go of Christy, and with Jenny, he made her feel so uncomfortable. And literally, one of the things he said was, can you give me a massage? And if you give me a massage, I'll put your sketch into the show. And even had them doing things like sending text messages to them or messages saying, say Hammer's loud. Then it got even more degrading. Like, say I'm a slut, say I'm this. Like, it was a mind. It was manipulation and a power control at its finest. And the last thing he did to her, where he called her in a room with all of the men in the room who were in the writer's room, he said something extremely inappropriate and she had had enough and she finally quit. But she fought back and she sued him and probably sued Nickelodeon too. Now, the sad part about this situation is she even says, I knew at that point, if I was going to take this route, my career would be over. But I just want to make sure that no other woman goes through this and that it will be worth it because I knew my career would be over. It is a sad situation that you telling the truth can end your career. Like, you telling the truth can really end your career. It's insane that she knew that doing this, it would be over for her. And she had just started in the business. So she did it. I'm hoping that both women got paid enough. I would love to see if they were able to continue in the business. But, and that's another thing too. He literally watched Korn, and y'all use your imagination. He was watching Korn while he was asking her for a massage. Just very inappropriate. Very inappropriate. So yeah, it was very disturbing. Very disturbing. So with that, you guys, The crazy part about it is, well, I'm gonna get into that at the end. I don't think that this is ever gonna be an industry that's gonna be completely removed of sickos. Every industry has sickos. But in a world of entertainment, like I just think this is always going to be the case. But with that being said, they said that there was a shift in Dan. And at one point, while it was fun, it got to a point where they described him as a tornado. And at first, it made me wonder, like, what happened? Like, was it the pressure or whatever the case may be? But in my opinion, it had nothing to do with the pressure. He was drunk off of the power. You know what I mean? Like he was drunk off of the power. He liked the smell of fear, in my opinion. That's what it was. And with Jenny, before I move on from the writers, he did hire Jenny back the second season, still making her a staff writer. Typically, if you get asked back a second season, you get promoted. He pretty much kept her in the same position. Then also told her that he was only going to pay her for 16 weeks, but she had to work 27 weeks. So, in other words, her whole life had to be dedicated to this show, but she was only going to get paid 16 weeks. And she took the position because she didn't know any better and she was desperate to work in the industry. Now, interesting enough, of course, while they're doing this documentary, they're giving information about what Dan has said to the allegations. He tried to say that he didn't have any control over the budget and what the writers were getting paid. In my opinion, because I have to say, in my opinion, that's bullshit. Dan was the showrunner, if I'm not mistaken, of that show. The showrunner is the highest writer in the room. He is also, or she is also, an executive producer. They are given the budget. They know what budget they have for their show and what budget they have for their writers in their writer's room. So the fact that he said he didn't have control of the salary, bullshit. Because he knows what the salaries are. He knows how much they are. So let's just say, for example, if you have $400,000 for your writer's room. Now, some people may spend most of that money on higher level writers, and higher level writers require a higher salary because they have more experience. And then if they only have so much money left, they only can maybe hire a lower level writer. It is up to the showrunner to figure out their budget to get the writers that they want. But in no way, shape, or form is it ever okay for someone to split a salary with someone. That's not how it works. So for him to say that he had no responsibility with the salary, hell no. And y'all can look it up for yourself. Look up what a showrunner does. Look up the ins and outs of a showrunner. It's a very, very hard job. But they know their budget. They're the ones who hire the writers. So when he said that, I was like, here we go with the bullshit, but moving on. So with that being said, y'all ready? Y'all ready? All right. So then we meet another type of parent. The parent who wanted to be an actress growing up. And her mother, knowing the business, said, no, it's not happening. And she said she regretted her mother for not putting her in acting. So then she ends up having a girl that she says has all the personality, an outgoing personality, and she puts her child in acting. So this is the parent who wants to live through the child. This is the parent who wants to actually wanted to do what the child is doing. So they're pushing a child into an industry that they really wanted to be in. Okay, this is Brandy. Brandy is discussed. Brandy, she says, was so in awe of these television shows. And I'm like, what child wasn't in awe of Nickelodeon or Disney? Every child loved TV. But she says that she finally got on the Amanda Bynes show. And once she got on the Amanda Bynes show, she ends up meeting this sicko. And this sicko name is Handy. I'm going to call him Handy. Jason Handy. Okay. He was a PA on the Amanda Bynes show. Now, one thing that they said is that the parents weren't allowed on set, which is another violation. The parents should always be allowed on set. Now, maybe people didn't like them being on set, but they should be on set. He was the one who would take the kids away from the parents and bring them on set. So he starts to develop a relationship with these kids, develop a relationship with these parents, and starts exchanging numbers with the kids and the parents. First of all, why the hell is a grown-ass man exchanging emails and telephone numbers with kids? That, to me, would have been the first sign of a hell no. But again, people tend to ignore things. They're not seeing the signs, so they're too busy seeing the limelight. He ends up exchanging emails, numbers with Brandy. It at first starts off with nice little email exchanges, several email exchanges, which again, this is a grown man emailing a child. But the final email he sent was him giving himself a helping hand. Again, you guys, trigger warning, like I said. And so, of course, she's traumatized. She's crying. The mom finds out what happens, but her first reaction is, if I call the police, they're going to think I'm a bad parent. Y'all, I had a problem with that. And for those who are parents in the chat, by all means, please chime in. That happens, and your first thought is, and I appreciate her honesty, I really do. But your first thought is, if I call the police, they are going to think that I am a bad parent. Therefore, she doesn't call the police. She just makes sure that Brandy is out of the industry. She never has to see Jason again. So in other words, Jason ended up getting a pass at that point, because had she called the police, there probably would have been an investigation sooner, and probably there wouldn't have been other alleged victims. But no, she decides, because she feels like she's going to look like a bad parent, she doesn't call. So at that point, what happened was, though, they ended up doing an investigation, and literally they find out, wait, let me see what you guys are saying. That doesn't sit right with me. Which part, Nivea? And hey, Nivea, which part doesn't sit right with you? This whole documentary? Yeah. Child, I'm going to call the police, the state trooper, the FBI. Yeah, exactly. You think he will want to give his email, phone number, info to the parents who are their managers. Apparently, he gave his information to both of them, but I would have said, you can give it to me. You don't need to exchange nothing with my child. You know what I mean? Because even if it's, first of all, I can't even say even if it's friendly. What adult who works on set needs to exchange emails and telephone numbers with a child? This girl, I don't think, was even 10 years old. So it didn't even add up for them to even allow that exchange to happen, in my opinion. Like you said, Brandy's mom was wrong for ignoring it. The fact that she's talking about she's scared to get in trouble calling the popo, not even scared to get in trouble, Nivea. She said that she felt like they was going to look at her like she was a bad parent. So it wasn't even about being in trouble. It was, her thing was, I'm going to look like I'm a horrible parent. So essentially what you did was, because you didn't want to do that, you don't even know how many victims could be out there. And that is the issue I had with it. And also, at this point, who cares what your ego is saying? Protect your child and protect other children. But that's my opinion. So with that, he ends up finally getting caught, though. He gets caught. And literally, A couple of months later, we have another sicko that gets caught. But we're gonna focus on Jason now. Jason ends up getting caught. He ends up spending 6 years, if I'm not mistaken, 6 years in prison because they ended up finding that he had bags of trinkets and things from these little girls. It was just mind-blowing. So he ends up spending time in prison. So now, back to Dan and his empire at Nickelodeon. We have a new cast from Nickelodeon, okay? And we have, I know this is actually Giovanni, which I love Giovanni, because Giovanni was probably one of the first younger girls that I saw on TV. Like that wasn't the all that I grew up on, but I love the fact that she had locks. You didn't really see, especially back then, girls and younger Black girls with locks in their hair. And then you also have Brian, who's the Black boy in here. And the guy with the glasses, I forgot what his name is, but he spoke on that, on the actual documentary as well. So they did a whole new cast of all that. Okay. Yeah, Giovanni was everything. Like, I was like, she had locks. I was like, I had never, especially in California, where it was known that a press was everything. And of course, for my New Yorkers, that's like a Dominican blowout. We was constantly pressing our hair out here. So to see her, embrace, I'm saying, her natural hair and lock it was definitely a new thing to see a younger girl like that with locks. So love Giovanni. And she was in a documentary also, for those who haven't, watched the documentary yet. So she pretty much, says that it was also a new experience for her and how she has self-esteem issues, identity issues. This industry, even as adults, will question your worth and your identity. Being a child, it makes it 10 times worse. Now, for those who are listening, I am not saying don't put your children in the industry, but you just need to know what to be aware of, have discernment, and literally when something doesn't feel right, act on it and don't ignore it. That's what I'm trying to say. There are definitely good people in this industry who are God-fearing, good people who just truly want to make great art. But there's still, you got to go through the weeds a lot of the times to get to those people. That's all I'm saying. And you got to make sure you and your child are locked in and can't nobody break that bond, because as we saw from this documentary, there are always people out there trying to get into your child's head to divide and conquer. That's just what it is. So with that, we have Brian. And Brian, like I said, is the Black boy who was on the show. And he had the parent who was no nonsense, like my mama was when I was in performing arts. She didn't play that shit, okay? So she was the no-nonsense mama, and her name is Tracy Brown. Now, for you, those who don't know, Tracy Brown is actually a psychic on YouTube. Look her up. Y'all remember Tracy Brown on there? Look her up. She's a psychic. She's been on YouTube for years. She does tarot card readings and all of that stuff. She has been on YouTube for years. So Brian immediately talks about how he was typecast. He was the dealer, the hustler. He was also, talking about the lack of the child labor laws, that were supposed to be in place. They weren't being implemented on set. And they had him be a rapper called Little Fetus. And he said that they had to put him in a bodysuit naturally because he had to look like he was, unclothed. That's the best way I'm going to say it. And they told him that the skin tone of the bodysuit should be charcoal. Okay? They said this in front of him. First of all, they should have never said it, period. But they said that in front of him. And he was traumatized. He cried about it. And literally he said he was going to go to his mom, but he knew his mom would have raised hell. And he really wanted that job. He really wanted to be a part of that family. He wanted that Hollywood life. So at a certain point, Tracy, his mom, started asking questions. and started saying, this is not feeling right here, to the point where even his agent, Brian's agent, was like, Tracy, just shut up, like, do this for Brian. But because she started asking questions, and rightfully, most likely fair questions to ask, she was getting blackballed, and Brian was getting blackballed because she was asking the right questions. And she wanted to be in the room, and she wanted to monitor her child. So because of that, Brian ends up not being invited back the next season. And it was a sad scene because she felt like at that moment, the bond had been broken between her and her child, because he felt probably disappointed. Like, he probably blamed his mom that if she wouldn't have pushed back so much, he would still be there. But I'm hoping he realizes now the type of hell she took him out of. I hope he realizes that. She really protected him. She really did. Because truly, it just shows more and more that they saw these kids, or just anyone, as just money. It's just pretty much for money and laughs. And they even talked about the competitions, the dares that they had to do. When you look back at that stuff now, it just all looks uncomfortable. It really does, the things that they had them do just for money and laughs. So pretty much these kids were getting paid to be laughed at their own mental expense. Like, psychologically, a lot of these kids are not the same. And they may still have money, they may not, but psychologically, they're never going to be the same because of the experiences that they went through. And it almost feels like even the people on set, whether it was parents or even producers or whatever the case may be, it almost felt like anyone who fought for those kids in a positive way eventually were told to leave. Okay? Eventually, they were told to go. So that's really one of those things where it's like, when you fight back, all of a sudden, yeah, it's gonna be a problem. Let me see what you guys are saying. Sorry, my bad. I didn't mean to put just, but yes, definitely just. Definitely went to jail protecting mine. Giovanni was very funny. I loved her in Bring It On movie. Yeah, she had she still has a great personality. Based on the documentary, sad how the Black kids were treated on these shows when they had just as much potential as their peers. I mean, this is still an ongoing issue, Alicia. I mean, it still is. You know what I mean? That's the sad part. No lie. All that came out in 94, I believe, and I was 12. And I remember thinking, what the F at some of these skits. You know what? I wasn't, though. And maybe because I wasn't thinking in that way. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think for some people, they have to think in that way, maybe, to understand, like, ooh, this is inappropriate. But like, when slime and things were like on someone's face, I didn't think about the C shot that they talking about. You know what I mean? I wasn't thinking that way. Now that I'm older, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, what is that? She did go above and beyond. Tracy, yeah, look at what they did to Shirley Temple and Judy Garland. Why on earth these parents let their kids around these monsters? Hi, Mila, how are you? Yeah. But the thing is, though, there are people who are successful. And let me give you an example before I continue. There are kids who can be successful in this business and can still be in their right mind. I think it also depends on who is the head of those shows, the head of those networks, who is protecting them outside of their parents as well. I hate to bring this name up, but I'm going to have to. As far as the protection of kids, we have not heard anything. Bill Cosby. Y'all heard anything about those kids from the Cosby Show? You haven't. A lot of them are still thriving. You haven't heard anything about them having any type of SA issues, any type of illegal substance issues. So I think it can be done. It just has to go from the top all the way down, including the parents protecting the kids and not looking at this as, you'll be okay, you'll be fine, because this could be your one big shot. You know what I mean? It can be done. Now, the problem is that we clearly see it's not done a lot, which is why I can really only say one show. Ain't that many shows I can say where the kids were able to come out, decent. A lot of them did not. And I'll definitely, go on to that. But I think it can be done. People just need to understand there has to be a gameplay. There has to be set standards. You have to have a strong bond with your child. You got to keep God first and not money and fame first, but God first. There's a way that it can be done. But let me continue. So, these are the three sickos that were all working at Nickelodeon at the time that all of these shows were taking place. The next one we're going to talk about is Mr. Brian Peck, okay? He was the one like 3 months later that got arrested after Jason Handy. Now, Brian Peck was apparently supposed to be a dialogue coach. Interesting. Well, he was also known as the Pickle Boy. How sick is that shit? The Pickle Boy on one of these shows. Hey Jay, how are you? Oh, no problem, Mila. I'm from La La Land. I'm from LA. So this is the type of stuff I talk about because I actually grew up around people, including myself, but I know people who were very involved in the industry as we were kids. And some of them aren't functioning well today, if I can just be honest. So Brian Peck was a dialogue coach for these shows. And he ends up literally creating this bond, I should say, sick bond with Drake Bell. Okay? Drake Bell started off on the Amanda Bynes show, like I said earlier. And then what happened was from the Amanda Bynes show, they ended up creating a show called Drake and Josh. Definitely not of my generation, but apparently it was a big hit on Nickelodeon. And so Drake's father was his manager. And Drake and his father had a great bond. And Drake's father said he started seeing Brian Peck come around more and more, and he started doing things that just made him really uncomfortable around his son. The problem is that Brian also saw that the father was being attentive and was looking at things, and the father wasn't comfortable. So at that point, Brian got into Drake's head and started saying, your father shouldn't be your manager. And even when the father confronted Brian, Brian said, well, parents shouldn't be their manager. Like the parents shouldn't even be a manager. So at that point, he started to understand and study Drake's family dynamic. And to me, he really started to get into, in my opinion, the psychological aspects of Drake and where he was at that time. Parents separated, apparently, I guess, an ugly divorce. So he started to do the divide and conquer. And the divide and conquer is who's the weakest parent? The weakest parent was the mama. The mama who didn't want to drive and take him to auditions. The mama who probably, like they said, didn't really have a good relationship with the father. And so eventually Brian got what he wanted. The father was no longer the manager. The mom became his manager. And at that point, Brian had his way to do whatever he wanted to do with Drake. Even when the father told the mother, fine, if he doesn't want me to be his manager, fine, but please keep him away from Brian. Did she listen to the father? No. She let Brian pick Drake up from the house, take him to auditions, even got to the point where instead of him taking him back to Orange County and getting there super late at night, he would stay over Brian Peck's house. And that's when the worst thing happened to Drake. Okay. And Drake is the reason why Brian ended up getting arrested, because he confessed on the phone with Drake Drake said, look, I'm kind of confused on what happened and what you did. And Brian confessed, and that's how Brian got arrested. Now, the problem is that Drake has his own demons as well. We do know that Drake apparently has had issues with alcohol, substance abuse, but he also had got a charge. Now, he claims that the media lied about most of it, but I'm going to read to you what allegedly this situation is. First things first, in August of 2020, his former girlfriend alleged that he PA'd her and VA'd her, use your imagination, and how he was having inappropriate behaviors with people underage. I'll just say that. And also, June 4th of 2021, he was arrested in Cleveland, Ohio on charges related to attempted endangerment of children. Okay. And apparently they had to, I guess they saw text messages, whatever the case may be. I even saw somewhere that they allegedly took a DNA sample, and I thought that was weird because I'm like, you take a DNA sample, what do you need a DNA sample if you claim there was no physical contact? But he claimed some of this stuff, they were lying. He did not. He pled not guilty. He didn't get jail time, but he got on bond, and pretty much the rest is history. Now, my thing is this: if any of this is true, when you are a victim that becomes a victimizer, I'm sorry, I can't rock with it. You stop the cycle. You don't continue the cycle. So he claims it's not true, but he definitely seems to have been going down a downward spiral because of everything that happened to him. I guess at the end of the day, we're going to either have to believe the media or what he says. Okay. Now, I don't know how popular he was at the time when he got arrested, but I don't know how much of that is considered a lie, but that is what was reported. Now, at the end of the day, he hasn't been back in the industry. He's trying to still get back on his feet. You guys, it's just really, really a sad, sad situation. But I'm not done. Oh, I'm not done. Because the problem is that when it was time for Brian to go to court, the industry, not all of it, but the industry. Okay, you said not true. He was convicted. He didn't serve any jail time. No, T. He didn't serve any jail time, right? I didn't see anything about him serving any jail time. He pled not guilty. They bailed him out. Like, I think he got maybe 2 years of probation or something like that. He got something, but he didn't get jail time. But, at this point, we got to go with what they're pretty much saying and what he's saying, because we really don't know what the actual truth is. But again, if he is a victimizer, I can't respect it. I can't, because you know how it felt. You know how it felt to be violated. So with that, the industry comes in. He was given probation, right? Okay. The industry comes in and they start giving Brian Peck all of these character letters, trying to plead with the judge about leniency and even victim blaming Drake as far as what happened to him. It was sick. It was sick, literally sick, how so many people, popular names at that, came in to defend Brian Peck. Now, Drake claims that Dan was very supportive of him during that time. Interesting enough, it seems like though it was private support, because he said in the courtroom Brian Peck had about 50 people on his end, but Drake, it was only him, his brother, and his mother. Where the hell was Dan? See, I don't do private support. Where was Dan at? If Dan was so much of a supporter, he should have been on your side, being there as a character witness for you and protecting you. but he didn't say Dan was there. I guess he was behind the scenes supporting him. But moving on. So not only did that happen, Brian ends up getting, I believe it was 16 months, if I'm not mistaken, only 16 months in jail. His sick ass gets out and he ends up getting another job in the industry. Not with Nickelodeon this time, but Disney. Yes, he just went right back to a kid's show working in the industry. How crazy is that? How crazy is that? So this is the type of stuff that goes on. So pretty much a slap in the face to not only Drake, but probably anybody else that was possibly a victim of Brian Peck, including that very famous person that they showed in this documentary that used to work with Brian Peck. People are speculating if possibly, maybe something like that happened to him. We don't know. Don't know if we will ever know. But typically in these situations, this is not the only victim. And I don't know if we'll ever know how many other victims there are. But with that being said, does that stop Dan though? No. Dan, I think in 2014, gets a Lifetime Achievement Award after being with Nickelodeon for 20 years. Now, mind you, he's never been accused of anything when it comes to the children, but he damn sure got accused of a lot of stuff when it came to the adults, making it a very hostile work environment. Very hostile. The women felt uncomfortable. Women were told to give him massages. And I'm like, you probably make millions of dollars. You can hire a damn masseuse. You don't need to have these women from the wardrobe department giving you massages. But again, sounds like it was a power trip of some sort. To the point where it got to a point, though, when Amanda Bynes wanted to remove her, so she wanted to be an adult. You know, that typically happens a lot in this industry, that kids actually decide when they become teenagers, you know, that they're old enough to make their own decisions. Now, Amanda Bynes' parents said, absolutely not. You're still a teenager. You're going to do what the hell I told you to do. But the industry was behind her because, of course, when these kids want to become a legal adult, at that point, they don't have the child laws that they have to follow. They can follow the adult laws, which pretty much would allow them to work whenever they want to work. So, of course, the industry was behind her, but her parents weren't having it. And it became a big issue because Dan was trying to support her, of course. And it got to a point where his stuff started to tumble because Amanda Bynes and her trying to get legally removed from her parents. It got to a point where Amanda had a show on the WB. I forgot the name of it, but she had a show as a teenager on the WB. They allegedly removed Dan from the show. He claims that didn't happen, but he claims none of this stuff happened. And then he's moved back to Nickelodeon and continues his empire. Like, it doesn't stop. Now, we also had, let me go back to this sicko, Ezell Channel. He was another sicko. All three of them working at Nickelodeon at the same time, who also got arrested. Now, the only time it got to the point where it became too much is when the Me Too movement came out. At that point, that's when Dan finally got shut down. Between that and the girl, I think her name was Jeanette from Sam and Cat, she finally spoke up. And she was going through a very horrific time. Her mother had passed during that time. And like, I think they said less than a week, she was back on set, probably being pressured to come back on set, even though she was grieving. Between that and the Me Too movement, they finally removed Dan Snyder after over 20 years. And they gave him allegedly $7 million to depart ways from him on top of that. All the money he probably made in that 20 plus years, plus $7 million, plus if any of these shows are still popular, I'm sure he's getting some type of residuals off of it. Oh, What I Like About You. Thank you, Nene. What I Like About You. And Ariana Grande. Yes, he discovered Ariana Grande on Nickelodeon, and some of the things that they showed were inappropriate that she was doing. Now, when it got to that point, and again, maybe because I was also older, when they were showing that, I said, wait a minute, the kids actually think this stuff is entertaining. The stuff that they had Ariana Grande doing, I was just like, he was pushing the envelope, and maybe because no one was ever regulating him and telling him, hell no, this is inappropriate, because they were too afraid to. You know what I mean? But again, we don't know for sure, Mila, so I'm gonna have to say allegedly, but we do know that some of the things that she was doing on the actual show, like throwing water on her, things that she was doing, the tomatoes, just completely inappropriate. So at that point, they tell him he has to go. All right. Now, y'all, this is Amanda Bynes now. This is Amanda Bynes, you guys. Now, the platinum blonde hair is not what's doing it. It's everything else. This does not look like the same girl. Okay. Now, I don't think has ever spoke on anything that went on negatively as far as the industry is concerned in that way. But we clearly see there is a shift. She has definitely had some mental breakdowns, has had to be admitted. This is her. This is her. Okay. Completely different. 360. Just completely different. You would not think that's the same girl at all whatsoever. So this industry, I mean, if you're not careful, it will snatch people's souls. It really will. And to me, that's what I'm seeing right here. She had more life in her eyes, more life in her. Now we're seeing where it's just like there's no life behind her eyes, in my opinion. This is it. But the thing is, yeah, she's young. She's young. I want to say maybe early 30s, maybe. But we've heard this story before, you guys. We've heard this story before. This is why I said there was only one show that I can really think of, is that you had more of the kids being consistently successful. But we've constantly heard these stories. Some of these stories you guys may not be familiar with. Different Strokes. Every single one of them kids in Different Strokes had issues, whether it came from parents taking their money, substance abuse. Drew Barrymore got her start on ET, and she went down a downward spiral, and apparently, allegedly, her mom used to help her and party with her. Macaulay Culkin, he's had his issues with his parents. I don't know if he's had any substance issues or anything, but you know, his story wasn't the best. And then you have the Coreys. For those who remember the 80s, the Coreys were those it guys in the 80s. And both of them had downward spirals. Both of them had downward spirals. So this is almost a constant hamster wheel of child star hell. I mean, this is what it is. Does it mean it's going to happen to every single person? No, but I do feel even those who got out as much as possible unscathed and you know, I do feel that it alters them a little bit, because the industry is a false sense of reality. It's not reality. And I think when you start off so young, you think it's reality, and it's not. Yeah, whew, they don't look nothing like who they were on Full House. Nothing like. Now, apparently they still making a good amount of money, but nothing like the Coreys and Drew, of course, but all but yeah. I wonder if Jonathan Brandis was music and who was that? Is that like a younger generation that I'm not aware of? But yeah, it definitely takes a toll. It definitely takes a toll. You have to make sure that, you know, and again, I'm not saying there are people who have been successful. I'll give you another example of someone who seems to have been very successful. Regina King. Remember, Regina King was on 227 as a teenager. And she had her moments of, being in and out of the industry right after 227, but you can be successful. You just got to stay grounded, and you really have to stay focused, and you really have to have that definite bond with your parents that are unbreakable, because people will try to break that bond to make sure that they can get close to you. You know what I mean? So let me see what you're saying. No, he was popular in the 90s and dated Ashley from Fresh Prince. Oh, okay. Okay. Because I was like, who is that? Okay. So yeah, but it definitely seems like there's more bad stories than good. That's for damn sure. And then it becomes intoxicating when you're being told yes all the time as a child. You're not being told no, and you got people kissing your ass, and you're not even 10 years old yet. You know what I mean? So yeah. Are you talking about Norwood? Definitely. She was. Now, I mean, at the end of the day, was she unscathed? I would say hell no. And neither was Ray J, in my opinion. Now, they definitely had a mother who was strong-willed. Their mama didn't play. Their mother was their manager, but being told yes at a very, very young age does something psychologically, as well as, but Brandy even admitted that, she was a mean girl, and she also was called ugly and all of those things, which probably made her a mean girl, even though she could sing her ass off. But it definitely is one of those. Now, luckily for her, she's had her ups and downs, but she was able to come out of it. She's still successful. She's a mom, but it definitely takes a lot. It definitely takes a lot. But yeah, Brandy is definitely one as well. But as far as her, I think a lot of stuff with Brandy, unless like you knew people, a lot of her stuff was undercover. Because remember, Brandy was around a time when there still wasn't good, like internet wasn't that popular. You know what I mean? Like Brandy is older than me. So there was a time where she could still run around and do whatever. And it wasn't like the TMZs and all of those people around. You know what I mean? So, yeah, we gonna move on from that one. Again, some of these people came in at a time where there wasn't a lot of social media and people trailing them with phones, which is why I think they were able to get away with things that we won't know about. And just like in our lives too, at the end of the day, for those who grew up when there wasn't no internet and there wasn't social media, I'm sure there are a lot of things that we did as teenagers and stuff that we'd be like, thank God social media wasn't around. And thank God there wasn't people who had cameras on their phones. You know what I mean? So yeah, they were able to get, past some things. So Dan Schneider has responded too quiet on the set, because of course it hasn't made him look good. And he just recently, I want to say a couple of years ago, said that he wanted to get back into kids TV. And how interesting that this comes out at this point, though. If somebody could literally have Brian Peck working in the industry again, I don't put it past someone giving Dan Schneider another chance. But what I found interesting in this situation is that he had one of his former cast, who I guess, I don't know what he was on, iCarly or whatever the case may be. The guy who's interviewing him is Black and also was on one of his shows. I think that was done on purpose because of people talking about the racial issues allegedly. He wanted someone who was Black and on his show to actually interview him. Now, interesting, I would have loved to see, I guess, someone Black and a woman interview him, because of course he was also being called out as being a male chauvinist piece of shit. But yeah, now I was gonna play it on my channel, but to me, Dan Schneider gives me the vibes that he will flag my shit. So we not gonna do it. But what I am going to do is I'm gonna play it and we're going to hear it. All right. So here we go.
Hey, it's Boogie. I played T-Bo on Nickelodeon.
Wait, hold on. Can you guys hear? Hold on. Let me turn it all the way up.
I got a chance to watch the Quiet on Set program, and I reached out to Dan to see if it was something that he'd be willing to discuss. I'm pleased to say that he said yes. Dan, how are you? I'm okay.
Pause. I don't think he reached out to Dan. I think Dan reached out to him, in my opinion, and I think he told him to make it seem like you reached out to me to check in on me. I think this was all staged. It is what it is. Let me continue.
I'm okay. I really appreciate you reaching out and giving me the opportunity to talk to you about what we saw over the last 2 nights. I'm really glad you're here because I believe this is important. For sure. We've got a lot of things to unpack. But before I dive into my list of topics that I'd like to discuss, is there anything you'd like to start off with? Absolutely. Watching over the past 2 nights was very difficult. Me facing my past behaviors, some of which are embarrassing and that I regret. And I definitely owe some people a pretty strong apology. Let's talk about the massage.
Pause. Look, we all can grow, okay? I'm sure we have all made decisions in the past that we regret. But to me, when you're sincere and you have learned from your ways, yeah, that means that typically you give those apologies before you're called out on your bullshit in public form. Did he apologize to any of these people before this documentary came out? Or does he now want to apologize now that he's been put on the hot seat for his bad behavior for 20 plus years? Just saying. So, with that being said, we're going to continue this PR publicity stunt, in my opinion.
Okay. Watching the content yesterday, it was disturbing. It was wrong. It was wrong that I ever put anybody in that position. It was the wrong thing to do. I'd never do it today. I'm embarrassed that I did it then. I apologize to anybody that I ever put in that situation. And even additionally, I apologize to the people who were walking around Video Village or wherever they happened, because there were lots of people there who witnessed it who also may have felt uncomfortable. So I owe them an apology as well. Yeah. Dan, talk to me about the writer's room. From what I saw, not cool. No, and I don't mean to cut you off, but if I can cut right to the chase, let me just say, no writer should ever feel uncomfortable in any writer's room, ever, period, the end, no excuses. Most TV writers, comedy writers have been in writers' rooms, and they are aware that a lot of times there are inappropriate jokes made and inappropriate topics come up. But the fact that I participated in that, especially when I was leading the room, it embarrasses me. I shouldn't have done it. And I can tell you why it hurts really bad for me. I remember very clearly my early experiences, my first experiences in the entertainment business. I was green, I was scared, I was excited. It meant the world to me that I was getting those opportunities. And I went in and I got lucky because they were great. My first couple of experiences were fantastic. And the fact that I didn't pay that forward to every employee that walked through my door, it hurts my heart because I should have. And I wish I could go back and fix that. In the writer's room, there's no doubt that sometimes those jokes went beyond the pale and I said things that went too far or made practical jokes that went too far. And that was wrong. And that was because, I was an inexperienced producer. I was immature. Wouldn't happen today. But I'm just really sorry it happened. Yeah. Now, we know you've had a lot of success over 2 decades. Thousands of people have worked with you, for you. Okay. Let's speak directly to the people who did not have a good experience with you. Okay, I would like to speak to those people because I hate that anybody worked for me and didn't have a good time. You know me. You've been on my sets. Look, I've had some employees that have worked for me for 10 years, some more than 20 years, who would work with me again, but not everybody. There's still a significant number that didn't have a great time working for me. So my batting average isn't nearly high enough in that area. And the way they wouldn't get the best of me is that I would let the pressure of doing 40 or even more episodes per year, I would let that pressure get to me, which a good boss should never, ever do.
Was there specific things that you were doing?
Sure. I would snap at people sometimes. I would be snarky when I could have given them a nicer answer. I would not give people the time that they needed. I would be in too big a hurry to get on to the next thing I had to do. And watching that show, it made me, there were so many times I wanted to pick up a phone and call some of those people and say, I'm so sorry, and let's talk about it. And I wish you'd had a better time, and I wish I could have shown you a better experience.
Blah, 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 blah. Okay, so look, at the end of the day, him being pressured and having all of these shows has nothing to do with you having women give you massages while you watch corn. It has nothing to do with you telling someone to do something inappropriate while they're telling a story about high school. What does that have to do? That had nothing to do with stress. That had to do with a power trip. And in my opinion, exactly. So you guys are seeing this, all of these politically correct answers, the violins, is just pretty much like this was planned. Look, some people may believe it. My whole thing is this: everyone can change. But you know when someone's serious about their change when there were apologies already given before this came out. You don't start apologizing once you get put out there. That's just what it is. Yeah, he's married. Now, I couldn't confirm, does he have kids? I'm curious to know if he has kids, especially daughters.
You've written hundreds of episodes. Thousands of jokes have been told.
Yeah.
But currently where we are, some people think that some of those jokes are inappropriate for children. What do you think of that?
All these jokes that you're speaking of, that the show covered over the past 2 nights, every one of those jokes was written for a kid audience because kids thought they were funny and only funny. Okay? Now we have some adults looking back at them 20 years later through their lens, and they're looking at them and they're saying, I don't think that's appropriate for a kid show. And I have no problem with that. If that's how anyone feels, let's cut those jokes out of the show, just like I would have done 20 years ago or 25 years ago. I cut it. I want my shows to be pop.
Oh, you mean like Penelope Taint? You mean like that joke? You would have cut it out? This is what I'm talking about. And I know for those who watched the documentary, you know who Penelope Taint is. We now know what taint means. And when you really think about it, Penelope has a play on words too when you think about how it was spelled in the beginning. I think Penelope was actually picked out for a reason also, in my opinion. But, he claims he was going to cut it out. He didn't cut out Penelope Taint.
Popular. I want everyone to like. The more people who like the show is, the happier I am.
Yeah.
So if there's anything in the show that needs to be cut because it's upsetting somebody, let's cut it.
So I think it's big for you to say with your work, if it's viewed as that today, you don't have a problem.
Cut it.
I mean, that's a solution.
The last thing I want to ever do is put any content in a show that's going to upset my audience and make them want to turn off the TV. Why would I ever want to do that?
That makes sense. I want to give you an opportunity to kind of elaborate on something.
Okay.
The thought process from the series is you had the power to just write a joke, and no matter what, it's going on TV. You just had that type of power. Is that true?
The notion that I had the power to just of approval, yes, and by the way, approval at every stage, really.
Okay.
And I'm talking about wardrobe. I'm talking about makeup, sound, sets, dialogue, jokes, everything.
Now, when you say approval, these obviously that's a hierarchy, not your colleagues or people in the room. Okay.
No, not my colleagues. No, these are my bosses, and then their bosses, and then their bosses, and they're approving all of this stuff.
Okay.
And we're also shooting it in front of all sorts of adults and caregivers and the set teacher and the families. Everybody's watching it. And if anybody had said anything, hey, we don't like that. That's not appropriate.
You would have gotten,
would have been cut out.
no,
Now,
you would have fired them.
Push back a little bit because the series painted you in this way that you were just the guy that was doing what he wanted, and people were afraid to confront you about things. So say, just humor me, say that was the case. What would have been the ultimate way to...
Okay. If nobody on the set, if all of the dozens and dozens of adults that were on the set, if they didn't say anything, if my bosses said, if they insisted, you got to make a change here, you got to cut that, I had to do it. I had no choice.
Got it. Now this next one.
See, this is where I say he's full of it, in my opinion, because again, for those who watch the documentary, they literally said that this man told them what taint was, what it represented. And apparently someone, I think they said from the network, came in and even asked about that and said, is that what you're referring to? And he said, no, why would you think that? That's sick. Absolutely not. So the problem is, even if they were to question something, it sounds like, based on what they're saying, he either lied about it, or if it was people under him that questioned him, he gave them hell or let them go. So it's just like, I'm telling you, but we gonna continue.
It kind of hit close to home. Being a new father, I wouldn't be opposed to my child being in the entertainment industry. It doesn't matter what age. Yeah. Seeing some of those on-air dares, seeing it now from where you are now in your life, what do you think of that?
I think that some of the on-air dares went too far. I think they pushed the envelope too far. Not all of them, not most of them, but some did. Nickelodeon wanted to do their version of Fear Factor. At the time, we were shooting All That, so I was tasked with doing these on-air dares with the All That cast. So we get with the writers and we come up with all these ideas, and it's hard to do because we don't have the budget of Fear Factor, and we can't put the kids in dangerous situations like the adults are put in. So it was hard to come up with stuff. But we would come up with all these ideas of dares they could do. We would give them to the network, and they would say, tell us the ones that were okay.
Right.
Those are the ones we shot. Those are the ones that aired.
I got a comment on this. It's not just them. I'm gonna be honest with you guys. Like, I always am very transparent about my past when it comes to my performing arts world and all of that stuff. I would say the most people that screwed me over or did some shady stuff look like me. They looks like me. And that's why I resonated with what Tiffany Red said about the publishing situation, because a lot of times it's a lot of people who look like you who will really be the ones to screw you over, because you think they wouldn't screw you over because they know how much it takes for us to get through. So it's not just them. It's not, you know what I mean? You got a lot who look like you who would turn a blind eye also. But at the end of the day, one thing about it, whether it is the entertainment industry or any other industry, if it's making money, a lot of people will turn a blind eye. They will definitely turn a blind eye.
At the time, I had no indication that any kid ever had a problem with them. But when I was watching the show over the past 2 nights, I now know that there were kids who did have problems with the on-air dares. And it breaks my heart. And I'm so sorry. I am so sorry to any kid who ever had to do a dare or anything that they didn't want to do or weren't comfortable doing. We went out of our way to make sure they were safe and that everything was done properly. But if a kid was scared and didn't want to do it, kids shouldn't have had to do it.
Yeah.
Period, the end.
Right.
And if I had known at the time, I would have changed it on the spot.
Now, we also saw the series highlight 2 former writers' viewers, 2 women, who spoke about a wage discrepancy. Now, I know that you don't divvy out salaries.
How the hell would you know that?
That part.
Well, you're correct. I have nothing to do with paying writers. I never have. I've never made a writer's deal. And of all the writers I've been in a writer's room with, I never even knew how much most of them were getting paid.
Oh,
we saw
my
these 2
God.
women who were writers for you sharing one salary. How does that happen?
It's very simple. There's a common practice in television when hiring writers. If you have a spot for a new writer, sometimes you'll go to 2 writers and say, hey, if you 2 new writers for your first job are willing to share a salary, you can both have the job. They have the opportunity to say yes.
That's not a common practice that the Writers Guild knows about. How are you the showrunner and you don't know your budget and you don't know what your... So he kind of contradicted himself. He says it's common knowledge that you go to two writers and say, this is what we have, and do you want to split it? But you just claim in a way that you don't know about their salary. You don't know about this stuff. So why would you be negotiating that if you know nothing about it and have nothing to do with it? Did y'all just kind of hear that contradiction? You claim you have nothing to do with the salaries, but you just said it's common knowledge to do that and approach writers. How would you even know? How would you even know that they were approached with that if you had nothing to do with it? You had to be involved in it to know that that's what they were offered.
Sounds good, or no, thank you. In this case, it was two women writers. I've done another show where that teaming was done with two male writers, and they split a salary. I did another show where it was a male and a female writer, and they split a salary. So,
And these are all first-time writers.
all first-time writers looking for their first gig.
Got it. Now, in the series, they also highlighted two Black actors who said that they felt overlooked. Now, I want to be clear. I'm never going to speak on anyone else's journey. Yeah, I can talk about my experience.
No one cares about your
how my
experience.
experience was with you, what I saw prior to working with you. But again, I don't want to speak on anyone's journey.
Now, I think, was it you, Princess Witch? Welcome, by the way. I'm sorry, you guys. For those who are new, welcome to the Chris Crew. Please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Did you say, Princess, that he barely had a role in the show that he was in? He wasn't a lead character, maybe had a few lines? If that's the case, he probably wasn't on the set consistently. If that is the case, I don't know him. I think this was definitely not of my generation, but I find it interesting, like people were saying, that he chose him. None of the bigger names, as far as his shows were concerned, have mentioned anything, nor did they want to interview him. But if he didn't really have that much of a role, you talking a little too much compared to these people who were known on the shows that he actually produced.
I saw you be honored for diversity in your work.
Yes. And the reason for that is diversity has always been very important to me in my shows. If you go back to the very first Nickelodeon show I ever made, that's very evident, as it is in the second one. And then the first movie I ever made for Nickelodeon, which starred Kenan and Kel. And every show I did after that had a lead Black actor in it. I'm very proud of that. It's very important to me. And not only am I proud that they were in my shows, I'm exceptionally proud of the achievements they've had beyond my shows. And they've gone on to bigger and better things. And that gives me a great sense of pride.
Well, something that really kind of bothered me was how they depicted your relationship with the cast.
Yeah, it bothered me too.
Yeah, just me being there, I knew the dynamic was trust. I understood that in situations where they may have had turmoil, whether it be with their families, whether it be other castmates.
Mila, I think he talks about this in this interview, if I'm not mistaken. I think he commented on that. I just can't post it because of the P word, but I think that's coming up. So I want to say he talks about that.
They came to you versus how they made you look. With that said, Amanda Bynes was brought up in the series and her emancipation and how you were involved in that. Can you talk to us about it a bit?
Sure. Amanda was between the ages of 16 and 17, and she wanted to get emancipated from her parents, which was a fairly common thing with successful young actors, at least at the time.
Sure.
And she wanted that for herself. So she turned to her team, which included her lawyer, her agent, her manager, her publicist, me, because she included me as part of her team, thought of me that way. We supported her. She tried to get emancipated and ended up not working out. She didn't.
Well, since we're here, let's stay here for a moment. There was also an incident where she had ran away from home.
Yes.
Can you talk to us a little bit just to clear the air of exactly what happened in that situation?
Yes. One night, it was very late, well after midnight, 1 or 2 in the morning. Phone rang. I answered. It was Amanda. She was upset. She was in distress. She had had some conflict with her parents, I think her father, and she called me. I was immediately concerned about her safety. I called someone who I knew was fairly nearby. That person was able to go and pick her up. Then I knew she was safe. I felt better. She ended up being taken to the police.
Well, regardless of what some people may think, I think it's only positive that you are there for people when they need you. That said, let's talk about some of the things that have just been swirling forever.
Okay.
You were banned from your set.
Never happened. That is a false rumor.
What happened?
Add it to the list of false rumors.
Talk to me. What happened?
They were adult actresses at the time, and they had their own specific reasons for not wanting to do the show anymore. I'm not judging that. It got tense, and what they don't know, maybe, is I did everything I could to make that show go away. My producer partner at the time, we would call and say, this is not a good situation.
Okay.
So I decided I'm going to do what most showrunners do, which is you're not on the set. There's a director there to shoot it. I'll go up to the writer's room. I'll work on the next script. But because everybody was so used to me caring about every detail of every show so much, for me not to be on the set, maybe some people thought I got banned.
So it was more of an assumption because this guy's usually here and now he's not.
I don't know if it was an assumption.
These assumptions can be proven. It can be proven if you were removed from your own damn show. It can be proven. People don't probably care to prove it, but it can be proven.
If somebody thought they were making me look bad by saying I got banned from the set, I have no idea.
Okay.
All I know is I was never banned from the set.
Yep. The darkest part of this series discussed child predators. Now, I want to make sure that we clear a couple of things up.
Okay.
Brian Peck was not hired by you.
No, I did not hire Brian Peck.
This was a Tolan Robbins production?
Yeah. And when Drake and I talked and he told me what had happened, I was more devastated by that than anything that ever happened to me in my career thus far. And I told him, I'm here for you. What do you need? Which Drake mentioned in the show that we watched last night. And next, I heard that he went to court when this guy was being tried, Peck. And when Drake walked in, he saw 50 people sitting on the side of the courtroom supporting Peck. A lot of them pretty famous. Of course, Drake was devastated that happened. And even more disappointing, 41 of those people wrote letters for Peck, character letters, praising him for who he was and asking for leniency. And they knew that he was guilty. They knew he had confessed to some degree. And they still did this. That's baffling that adults would do that.
Yeah.
And I don't know if people know this, but Drake's mom, a lovely woman who I stay in contact with this day, she came to me at the time and she said, Dan, I'm not good with words like you are. And would you help me with my speech for the judge? And I said, of course.
There we go.
And I did. And he ended up going to prison and serving his time. And yeah, that was probably the darkest part of my career. And here's the kicker that I really don't get. After he got out of prison and was, to my knowledge, a registered sex offender, he was hired on a Disney Channel show. I don't understand that. I don't understand.
Yeah.
Well, here's the thing. Yeah, we all don't understand that, but my thing is this. I don't know why he felt that he needed to mention that he wrote the letter for Drake's mom. I truly think that was self-serving, that was narcissistic of him. If that is a conversation that you and his mother had at probably one of the most difficult times, the most guilty times that she probably had in her life, knowing what happened to her son, that's not something that you need to actually say to us. But that, in my opinion, was a way for him to look good, for he thought maybe would look good as far as the public is concerned. Everything he's trying to say he's holding himself accountable for how he treated people, but a lot of the stuff that can be very damaging, he's saying is a flat out lie. And I think his ego is still bothering him that people are saying he was kicked off of his own show. I don't know if that is true or not, but what I do know is that there are definitely people in the industry at that time, even executives, that if they really wanted to, they could probably verify if it's true or not. They could. But people have moved on with their lives. They don't want to probably have their names attached to him, but he's saying it's a lie, but at the same time, where did they get that from? They said that multiple times. Like, his name was just on the show, but he was no longer involved on the show. So I don't know. But I do know if people cared enough to really put it out there, I'm sure there could be proof and paperwork maybe to even back it up that he was removed from his own show. I'm just saying.
I appreciate you sharing that, man. Are you okay? You want to take a minute?
Yeah, I'm all right.
You want to take a minute? Shut the hell
Okay.
up.
I think we really unpacked some important things. We set the record straight on a lot of things.
Mhm.
Before I let you get out of here, I appreciate the vulnerability that you use in knowing that there's definitely things that you would have and should have done differently.
Mhm.
Is there anything that we haven't discussed? Anything that if you could go back and navigate the journey differently, what would that look like?
Yeah, there's definitely things that I would do differently. One that I think would be really, really important is when you're hiring young actors, minors, to work in television.
I don't want to hear your opinion on that. At this point, it is what it is. So you guys, look, that is the end of my review and my thoughts on this powerful yet disturbing documentary. Will this stop people from putting their kids in the business? No, it won't. I will hope it will make them more aware of what they need to be mindful of. But again, it really depends on the parent and the reason for putting their child in the industry in the first place. Unfortunately, you do have parents out there who will be willing to sacrifice their own children for fame. That is just the sad part about it. I've seen it personally. Okay. There are always going to be parents that are about themselves and they're using their kids as a prop. But the ones that are like Tracy Brown, either they're going to completely keep their kids away from the industry, maybe do stuff on an independent level where they can still kind of get their creative talents out there. Or they're just going to make sure that they safeguard and keep a strong foundation between them and their kid if they are going to go into the industry. I don't feel like I said, the industry is not all dark and demonic. But you just really have to, when you see something, say something type of thing. Even the problem is that they feel like it's gonna, destroy their career. But when something just doesn't feel right, trust your gut. That's the main thing. Trust your gut. Otherwise, you're going to have situations where you're going to have kids with just a couple of years of fame end up being destroyed for the rest of their lives. And that's the sad part. A lot of these kids they don't recover. They do not recover. Yeah, the fake tears, the fake tears, the fake tears. They knew, and I will keep believing they knew until I'm proven wrong. Hey, Tashonda, yes. He would do things differently because of social media and cell phones, right? And my thing is, again, if you were really sincere about knowing how horrible you were, you would have said, I've apologized to these people, and it's even worse that, I had to see this in a documentary form. But he didn't say he apologized to any of these people. He's saying he needs to apologize now, but it's like, it took a documentary for you to do that. So are you really sorry about your behavior, or is it because you're being called out that now you want to say that you're sorry? Oh, no, thank you for coming. Make sure you guys hit the like button. Yeah, these parents knew deep down something was wrong, but they brushed it off. Yeah, notice this happens to most of the less fortunate kids, the kids with no choice but to work. I would say yes and no. because the Drakes, and there's some other kids out there who, they came from two-parent households. Now, of course, Drake's parents divorced, but I wouldn't necessarily say that they all came from, I guess I guess you're trying to say like maybe poverty areas or whatever. That's not always the case. That's not always the case. Some of those kids probably came from good families in a sense of financially and things like that. You know what I mean? But again, it's that fame. It's that power, that it's an addiction for them to be on the red carpets and be popular, whether they come from a family that has millions of dollars or a family that only has $1. It does something to people. It alters their brain in a sense of they always want to feel that type of high, that adrenaline, being loved and being famous. So I would say it's on both ends. We've heard stories that from kids who come from middle class families to kids who were living in the projects, all going through a lot of devastating things, being child stars. It's a sad situation, but I think it can be done right if people truly go in with the plan and knowing what they're up against. They have to. And at this point, there's no excuse to not know what you're up against. There's too many documentaries, there's social media, there's YouTube, there's too many things out there. You cannot come into any industry now and say that you are completely naive. Now, you may have a stupid moment because you want to be able to get some type of work or whatever the case may be, but you can't continue to pretend that you are naive and there aren't resources out there for you to understand when things are right or when things are wrong. You just can't. Not in this day and age where information is at your fingertips. You can't. But with that being said, you guys, I really hope you like this live. I don't know if everybody watched the documentary. For those who are going to be on the replay gang, definitely share your thoughts in the comment section. I hope I thoroughly broke down the documentary, my thoughts on it. Again, everything is all alleged. I can't say anything is really factual, because at the end of the day, these people probably at this point, Dan Schneider probably got a whole attorney crew looking at the internet trying to figure out who's saying what at this point. Who the hell knows? But it definitely was probably an eye-opener to some people. I know it definitely affected some people growing up and wondering what the hell. I know for some of it, I wasn't really a big time Nickelodeon person. I did watch, like I said, all that, but by that time, child, what was going on in 94? Martin was on, Living Single was on. By then, I don't even think I was really watching those kids shows like that. And then by 95, 96, I think Moesha was on. So I was watching those type of shows. But for a lot of people who did watch it, I'm sure it definitely gives a different perspective. But let Nickelodeon tell it, and other networks, they have now safeguarded and they are doing background checks on even freelancers now. They're making sure that these kids are protected, and that's all that matters to me. But the first line of protection comes from the parents. That's who it definitely starts with. The parents have to be the first line of protection. And stop thinking that because these people are adults, they wouldn't dare do the things that are unthinkable. Like, it will happen. Oh, Lord. All of your childhood was not a lie. Please don't think like that. You still, if you, I guess I can see for those who are really like big time Nickelodeon fans, how this could really traumatize you. I get it. I really do. But hopefully this will make you aware of things in the future. And another thing that it made me an eye opener of, because when I saw the Ariana Grande stuff and all of those things, and the fact that they still had the viewers, I'm like, are parents really realizing what's on the TV, or are they assuming because they're on Nickelodeon or they're on these channels that is automatically appropriate. And that's another thing too that needed to come into play that I think people forgot. Like, but again, I'm sure when we were kids growing up, it was Sesame Street. Well, Sesame Street, I think, is still on, but Sesame Street, Fraggle Rock, those type of shows, I'm sure our parents weren't really watching with us a lot of the times. But at this point in this day and age, and with this documentary, it is very clear, in my opinion, that you need to watch what your kids are watching. Sit down and even watch a couple of episodes with them to really see what is coming across the screen, because you just never know. You just never know. So with that, I hope now that it's out there, the kids find peace. I hope so too. I really do, because a lot of them said they had to go through a lot of therapy, but hell, people who didn't even go through childhood star, stuff have therapy. But Leon said, I think he suffered from drinking. I think someone said that. What now? They're gonna come out with the Barney documentary now. Oh my gosh, please don't. Please don't. Hopefully not. I will have to catch the beginning on the replay, but I wasn't a big Nickelodeon person either. Yeah, I just watched all that, maybe the first season or so. But yeah, I wasn't a big by that time. I was, and I guess maybe to a certain extent, but see, back then, Martin and Living Single was family friendly to a certain extent. They didn't do too much, especially Martin. So like Martin was definitely something the whole family could watch and be entertained by. But by then I felt like I was getting too old to be watching, those channels. So it is what it is. But yeah, you may need to watch what your kids is watching, because you just never know. But it may just be my age era, because I watched a lot of yeah. I think around that time we was starting getting in preteens or teen area. We was watching Fox and UPN. Y'all remember UPN? Fox and UPN was my channels back then. But with that being said, you guys, I really appreciate you guys coming to the live. I hope you enjoyed me doing the review. With that being said, please, oh my gosh, really? It's out there in room. Oh my gosh. Okay, so you guys, let's end this before we find out some more traumatic things. Continue the conversation in the comment section. Please like, share, and subscribe, and I will see you on my next video. Toodles.